Welcome back, everybody, to 31 1990s horror movies for Halloween, where I'm counting down my favorite horror movies from the 1990s. At number 25, we have gotten to a movie that I can see getting higher on my list over time. But as of right now, I think it works at the number 25 spot. So we have a Hong Kong horror movie at number 25, and that is The Untold Story. Now, this movie was inspired by an amalgamation of different events. So some people say it's based on a true story. That is kind of true. It took inspiration from multiple different stories, and made it its own thing. This is a serial killer movie, and it's a very, very good serial killer movie. It's almost to the level of something like Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. There are a couple of things that hold it back just a little bit, but if you like Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, I think you will like The Untold Story. The main character is this guy named Wong Chi-hong. He's the new owner of this restaurant called the Eight Immortals Restaurant, or something along those lines. This restaurant is known for its famous pork buns. Now, the owner of this restaurant has recently disappeared, and he has become the new owner of this restaurant, and the police have become suspicious of him. At the same time, the movie begins with a bunch of body parts being found on the beach. And you know what's going on right away. Wong Chi-hong is not the most stable person, and you know he's up to no good. And we learn that he is a murderer. We learn that he has killed people. Not only that, we know that he's killing people and using human meat to make this restaurant's famous pork buns. I love the idea of the ignorant cannibal, someone who is engaging in cannibalism but doesn't know it. You know, the idea of a restaurant serving human meat to people and they don't know it's human meat. They don't know they're eating human flesh. This was explored in Motel Hell, and it did a good job in there, but I think that The Untold Story tells this story even better. Wong Chi-hong is such an intense character. He is a lot like Henry in Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, but I'd say even more unstable. It's one of those things where you don't know when he's going to snap. And the death scenes in this movie are very unsettling. There's a lot of off-screen murders, but you do get a fair share of on-screen murders, and they are brutal. I mean, they are just hardcore death scenes. Now, we get a lot of great moments in this, but the movie is building up to an ending sequence. I don't want to spoil it here, but we'll say that Hong did something, and the majority of the movie is the police trying to find out what he did. It eventually does lead to him saying what he did, leading to one of the most horrific scenes in any serial killer movie. There is an element of here that does turn some people off, and it does bother me to an extent, but not too much. There are scenes with police officers in this movie, and a lot of the police officer scenes are handled in a more comedic way. A lot like in Last House on the Left. You remember in Last House on the Left, you would have these disturbing scenes, and then you would have these scenes with these goofy, good old boy, Billy Bob cops that were more on the comedic side. And that doesn't work so much for the film for me, especially in a movie that's trying to be disturbing like this, just like in Last House on the Left. Now, The Untold Story is a Category 3 film. I'm not too familiar on Category 3 Hong Kong movies, but Category 3 movies in Hong Kong were movies that were more on the extreme side of things, from what I have researched. So I haven't seen too many Cat 3 Hong Kong movies, but this was one of the first ones, and yeah, it does get pretty intense. So, Cat 3 Hong Kong movies, from the ones I have seen, they are for people who are more into extreme horror movies at times. So you do have to keep that in mind when watching The Untold Story. This is a movie that takes no prisoners. Like I said, there's one particular death scene that is really intense and hard to watch, and then we get to that scene in the third act that is one of the most devastating scenes to watch in the third act. But what's interesting about this movie is, this is kind of a spoiler, but I think people should know about it. Hong eventually does get captured by the police, and they are keeping him in jail, and they're trying to get him to confess, and as a result, they're not treating him very well. I mean, they are treating him horribly, like interrogating him in ways that are not okay, and things like that. So it creates this interesting moral question, because yes, Hong is a terrible person, but the way he's being treated is not justice. So you're torn. He's like, yeah, he's a terrible person and probably deserves all these horrible things that are happening to him, but these police are going too far, and you don't want people in this kind of position of power to go to the lengths that they're going through. It's kind of like in A Clockwork Orange with Alex, creating that moral question. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind when going into this movie.
做乜打你啦？係，哎呀，仆街！
阿 Sir，你打完未啊？病人要打針啊！
The Untold Story is not for everybody, but if you are a fan of serial killer movies, and if you're okay with some goofy humor mixed in with some really disturbing stuff, I would say, yeah, the Untold Story is worth your time. If you're a fan of Last House on the Left, I think you will like The Untold Story. It's goofy in some points, but it's also disturbing in many points. If you decide to watch this one, just be ready for not just one punch in the gut, but a few punches in the gut. It's one of those movies.
Ah!